Welcome to episode number 10 of The Ghost Investigator. Note I did not say a mini episode. This one's a little longer. We'll say it's our 10th anniversary episode, and it does not take place in the Hudson Valley area, which most of the stories, I think all of them so far have. This one doesn't involve a Hudson Valley resident, however. And this one is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. And let us dive right in now that you are forewarned. All right, Willits, California. It's about as far across the country from the Hudson Valley as you can get. However, that's probably a good thing considering the gruesome events that occurred there a century ago and the terrible evil that may still dwell there today. Dun, dun, dun. I had to add that. In the 1980s, we'll call her Grace, was a Hudson Valley resident. She received a job offer near this quiet community in the heavily wooded regions of Northern California. Events moved quickly and she soon found herself in the town with only temporary housing arrangements. Affordable apartments were not easy to come by. It was California. And Grace began to wonder if she had made the right decision. Wow, you have to be pretty desperate at that point. You've moved out there, you have a job, where are you going to live? So not a lot of planning, but she thought it was the right move. As she was beginning to feel a twinge of desperation, a woman told her about a beautiful Victorian home for rent. Grace was about to explain that she could not possibly afford such a place, but the woman finished the description by adding that the rent was only $200 a month. Now, I know this is the 1980s, but California, $200 a month, beautiful Victorian. If it looks too good to be true, boy, is it. So assuming the house was actually a dilapidated hovel, Grace was nonetheless tempted by the attractive rent, and she arranged with the realtor to view the house. When the realtor's car pulled up in front of the house, Grace could not believe she had the right address. She thought, I'm the luckiest person in the world. No. It was indeed a beautiful Victorian structure and in excellent condition. There was more than enough room, the location was ideal, and the price was just too good to be true. And we've covered the too good to be true aspect here. She signed on the spot. However, as I said, buyer beware or renter beware if it's too good to be true. Grace should have heeded that warning. It would have saved a lot of horror she was about to undergo. The front door opened to a spacious foyer with a parlor to the right and a large, beautifully carved staircase climbing to a landing, then reversing direction up to the second floor. One evening, soon after moving in, Grace was relaxing in the parlor, now no doubt wondering how she had been so lucky to acquire such a place. These pleasant thoughts were soon transformed to terror by the sound of footsteps rushing down the hall on the floor above her and then heading down the staircase. Now remember, she lives alone. Not a good sign. Frozen with fear, Grace expected to see her intruders appear on the landing at any second. However, probably something even worse, possibly nothing appeared. At least nothing she could see. Yet, still, the pair of running footsteps continued down the second half of the staircase, stairs that were in full view of Grace from her seat in the parlor. The first set of footsteps were light, like those of a woman. They were accompanied by the rustling sound of a type that would have been made by long skirts and petticoats. Close behind were the heavy footsteps of a man and an odd swishing sound of something going through the air. Uh-oh. When the running footsteps reached the bottom of the staircase, all of the sounds stopped. Good? Maybe. However, it was not a reassuring silence, as it was accompanied by a sickly stench that suddenly filled the entire parlor. A strong sense of an evil presence swept through the room, and Grace ran out. Yeah, I'd run out too, like all the way out. Yet, as soon as she crossed the threshold into the foyer, the odor and the presence vanished. Still curious, despite the terrifying occurrence, Grace took a step back into the parlor. The nauseating smell of death hung in the air once again, but seemed unable to leave that room. This is something that often happens. Activity is localized, sometimes to a section of the house, a floor of the house, a room of the house, even a single spot in the room. As a professional trying to establish a reputation in her new town, it is perfectly understandable that Grace did not mention the bizarre episode to her colleagues and friends. However, her reluctance to speak had no effect on the reoccurrence of the awful sounds and smells that continued to plague her. So basically, she suffered in silence. The scenario always played out the same way. A woman's desperate footsteps, quickly followed by a man's, the rustling skirt, the odd swishing sound, and then silence at the bottom of the stairs. Then there was the stench, the horrible stench that pervaded every corner of the parlor and seeped into the upholstery and curtains and drove her from the room. And the evil, it was a fearful presence which filled the house and quickly made life in that seemingly tranquil Victorian home unbearable. Grace managed to stay for 3 months for the sake of the rent. That's a long time to put up with something like that. Once would be enough for most people. However, she soon came to the inescapable conclusion that it was not worth staying there another day, even if they paid her to do it. Hastily moving all of her belongings to the front yard, she was happy to find that the stench did not remain with the items from the parlor. There was a tremendous sense of freedom and relief. There was also one other nagging emotion. Can we guess what that is? Just a bit of anger at the realtor. So here's this poor woman, terrified for 3 months, throws all her belongings essentially on the front yard, calls the realtor and says, okay, now that I'm out and I am not going back in, tell me the truth about this house. And the realtor's like, well, the house might be haunted. You think? Yeah. Grace said, no kidding. You can imagine, fill in your favorite word there. No blank. So finally, the realtor relented and told her the entire gruesome story. Sometime near the turn of the century, the man who owned the house became filled with a murderous rage for reasons we may never know. Grabbing an axe, he chased his terrified wife down the hall of the second floor. Literally running for her life, she raced down the stairs, her heavy skirts rustling loudly in the effort. Just steps behind her was her husband, frantically swinging the axe at her, creating that distinctive swishing sound as it missed its target and cut through the air. As the wife reached the bottom of the stairs, he didn't miss. The husband brutally murdered his wife with the axe, swinging again and again until her screams were silenced. Dragging her lifeless body across the foyer, he pulled her into the parlor. He then took a rope, tied it to the ceiling, and hung himself. It was several days before the bodies were discovered. This story pretty much explains everything this poor woman was encountering. Now, did this activity continue after this woman moved out? Well, possibly yes, possibly no, because several years later, this house burned down. Possibly it was a mercy releasing this poor tormented soul, two tormented souls, obviously one the aggressor and one the victim. Or maybe it didn't release them. Maybe the energy is still there and another house was built on top and it inherited this activity. We don't know. But if this is not a lesson to really pay attention to a house you're looking to rent, or even more importantly, buy. Ask questions, ask the neighbors, tell the realtor, ask the realtor, would you sign something that to your knowledge there is no haunted activity? Because no one needs to live with this horror. So I hope you enjoyed this somewhat longer edition, and we will have more to come. Until then, take care.